Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you the final round of Zadar Open. And after 8 rounds I was on 5.5 and I had a chance to win my first cash prize ever. And there was a prize up to 2000 rating, which I fall into that category. So at this point, after 8 rounds, I was in clear lead out of all the players rated below 2000. And if I win, obviously I'm clear first. And I'm playing a very tricky opponent, rated slightly lower than me, but actually very strong. And I looked at his games at the Sholta Open, played in August, and also his games from Zadar. And he's a very young player and stronger than his rating, actually. And I've prepared something that normally I wouldn't play, but I wanted to play something tricky and sort of surprise him. So we have the London system, and I'll show you what I prepared and what he usually plays. So d4, whoa, excuse me. So d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, e3, e6, knight d2, c5, c3, normal, knight c6. Okay, now I played knight to f3, and he took on d4, which is a line he's played once before. So when I was preparing for the game, I looked at this in detail and decided I was going to deviate from the main moves. So ed4, knight h5 is all theory, bishop e3, bishop d6, and knight e5. This is all very normal. Attacking the knight on h5. Black cannot take on e5, so black plays g6. This is all standard. Now there are a couple of ways to play this for white. The main line is knight to d3. Two aggressive moves are g4 and f4, and you can also play a normal move like knight d to f3. There's one more line which has been played, which involves a pawn sacrifice from black, but it's considered to be slightly better for black. The engine actually gives it as minus 0.7, so it's not that white is equal. White is actually worse after my next move, but I prepared it in detail and decided to risk, and that's bishop to b5. So bishop b5 threatens to win the c6 pawn, with a ton of activity for black, obviously. There is pressure on h2 after queen c7. There's knight f4 coming in many lines if I take the pawn, forcing me to give up my bishop, and then also play positions with pawn to g3 to defend h2. And also, very importantly, this bishop on c8 is going to be a menace along my light squares, in many cases preventing me from castling. So if black does nothing, if black simply castles, then I take the pawn and accept the gambit. The best move for black is queen to c7, after which the best move for white is actually just to castle and give up the pawn on e5 for activity after castles for black. But you can also continue queen a4, which I'd intended to play. And now after castles, again I win my pawn. And again, black has a slightly better position. Not to get into too much detail, black castled here. And I should say that after bishop b5, he spent quite some time, about, I'm gonna say 15 minutes. So I figured he wasn't too familiar with the position, but after the game, when we talked about the game and briefly analyzed, he said that he knew the sacrifice and that the sacrifice was perfectly sound and that he played castles before. Okay, so I take the pawn. He takes. Rook b8 is basically forced, and now b4 is the best move, defending my b2 pawn. Now, he made a mistake here, allowing me to equalize, which may sound strange because I'm a pawn up. He played knight f4. I have two options here. I can take the knight, and after bishop takes, continue with g3, which I played in the game, or I can simply castle. Knight d3 is not scary at all. Also, if he plays bishop a6, I'm probably very happy to give up a pawn back with b5, because then I have a very pleasant position and he has more weaknesses than I do. I can continue with queen f3 after that, and his knight is sort of in trouble, and then bishop h6 is coming, etc. But I decided to go bishop takes knight. Now what he should do here is bishop to a6, preventing me from castling. And this forced line I prepared in detail. And I was actually expecting to play this in the game. I was going to play a4. Now he has only one good move, and that's rook to c8. And after b5, he gives up the exchange straight away. And after bc6, it's really unclear how much better the position is for black. It's clear that it's better for black because my king is sort of stranded, and these three pieces will start attacking while this one makes sure that my king is stuck in the center. There are ways to get out of this, and I analyzed many of them, and I'm sure my opponent would not have found the best moves, but still. Okay, so after b4, he again spent a lot of time before his decision to play knight f4. I played bishop f4, he played bishop f4, I played g3. And now again, he started spending a lot of time. At this point, I still had an hour and a half. He was below 1 hour already. Maybe he had like 45 minutes. In the end, he took on d2, which is the best move. And queen takes d2, and now bishop to a6. And here, I actually knew that this position was equal. I didn't know how exactly I should continue. I didn't go this deep into my prep looking at the deviations. But I was familiar with the position. And there's a pattern which I've been looking at in many positions, and that's simply transferring my bishop to d3, making sure this pin no longer exists. And once the knight has been traded off and the dark squared bishop has been traded off, I basically cannot get under pressure. So I played bishop to a4. And now if black does nothing, then bishop to c2 is a very strong move. And not that I'll be a clean pawn up if I get to play bishop d3, but I'll actually have a strategically winning position because I have a plan and black doesn't. So let me just play a few stupid moves for black. I'm not going to take the exchange. I just want to show you what I mean. So here, okay. Now if the bishop isn't traded off, then, I mean, bishop b7 blocks the rook, bishop c8 is blocked behind the pawns. So let's say takes and takes. And now once I castle and play a4, this is a clean passed pawn, and also I can continue with c4, breaking the center afterwards, after I've played b5. So after bishop a4, again, he started thinking a lot. And by the time he played his move, he had like 15 minutes on the clock. I had an hour and 15 minutes. And he played e5. Now e5 is the losing move. It's not hard to see why, but it's very hard to assess all the positions afterwards. At least it was for me. Once I put the position on the board when I was analyzing the game that afternoon, I won immediately for white. And I couldn't understand why I didn't go for the critical variation. So obviously the critical variation is pawn takes e5. He doesn't have rook e8 because of my bishop on a4. So he could play queen e7 or queen c7, doesn't really matter. Queen e7 should be better to put pressure on the e5 pawn. Now f4 isn't a good move, it's not necessary. I can just continue queen f4. And f6 is, well, it's basically not possible to play f6 because I can take on d5. That was the first piece of analysis I had to do. So if f6, queen takes, and I mean, here I'm forced to castle queenside, but that's perfectly fine. I don't think black has enough for a pawn, for two pawns, excuse me, once he takes back on e5. So after e5 and takes and queen e7 and queen d4, if f6 is not possible, then the only other idea is rook to c8 to try and challenge the c4 square, force my queen from the blockade. I continue bishop b3, preventing rook c4, and he continues bishop to c4. Now, if I want to play this precisely, I would have to take and then take on d5, which I was afraid to do. And I got this far in my analysis, and I saw that if I don't take, then he doesn't have to take here. He can just play f6 and now get a good position. So if I don't do anything, let's say I play h3 and he plays f6, now this is becoming trickier because he also has rook e8. He's going to break through the center. My king is still on e1. But after bishop c4 I can just take, and after rook c4 I can actually take on d5. After rook c3 I get to castle, and this is a clean pawn up. I mean, the position is not winning because it's a major piece endgame and anything could happen. But if anything, my king is safer than his. And my e5 pawn is a very important asset, which I can use to break through to his king. That being said, he could double up the rooks on the second rank, but for the moment, everything's defended. And also, he could lose the a7 pawn in the process. But still, knowing that I had to win in order to win the prize, I should have taken on e5, and I didn't. I was too afraid. I played a weak move, a move that leads into a completely equal endgame, which I knew was going to be drawn. Now, practically speaking, when you have an hour on the clock and your opponent has 15 minutes, going into an equal endgame is a bad decision, regardless of the tournament standings. But I played b5 and I just wanted to castle and get on with it. Obviously this is a draw, so bishop takes, rook takes, d5, queen b8, castles, queen e5. And here he offered the draw and I accepted. If he had 30 seconds on the clock, it's still highly unlikely that I can create any chances. Needless to say that I was upset with my decision to go for this, but explaining why I didn't take on e5 doesn't really have much to do with chess, with analysis, or with calculation. It has to do with the fear I get in my head of like, oh, okay, what if I lose? What if this doesn't work? I need to start risking more, I know, and I'm perfectly aware of that. So the game was drawn. This is all zeros. I don't have to point that out. We are going to trade these two pawns, and then the structure is going to be symmetrical. Both kings are going to be safe. Nobody's really risking anything, so we drew. Again, coming back to the critical position after e5. Once you put this on the board, when your head is cool and when you're not playing over the board, it's just an easy win. If I saw someone playing this position, I would think, okay, white is just winning, just take on e5, and after queen e7, go queen d4. There's absolutely nothing for black. And that's true. I mean, it's completely true. I could castle kingside, I could castle queenside. That there are no issues for white whatsoever. And also, if black does nothing, for example, like here, then I can go b5. And once bishop takes, I can do this. And again, I'm a pawn up. And in many variations, it becomes a simple win. And then when the game finished, I was waiting for the tournament standings to see. I mean, there were two prizes up to 2,000, and I still could have won. I had 6 out of 9, which is good, 66%. And in the end, I won the first prize up to 2,000, even though I played like a coward in the final round. So my cowardice ended up paying off. Still, I wouldn't have lost the position had I played correctly. So I won my first prize ever. Okay, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you got something from this video. Remember the variation that he played with CD. It could occur in your games, and it's actually not that easy to handle. The strategic implications of knight d3 instead of bishop b5 are very complicated to understand. So if you plan to play the London system, you need to know that. And I would recommend not playing bishop b5, because as you can see, these positions are not easy to handle. Okay, see you tomorrow for the first round of Rabat's Open. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.